my talk is a photo is worth more than 1,000 words. I know it's really corny for anyone who's actually a photographer, this weird little saying, but I think that there is a good reason why we landed on this title when we created it 6 months ago for what my talk will be about. I actually use words in my photos to make my photos worth a little bit more than they normally are. But there's also things that I do in the photos themselves which add value to it. So that's what we're here to talk about. And I'm really excited to share with you guys. So, like I said, I am a freelance, full-time freelance now, art director, designer, and lettering artist, letterer. I still have a lot of discomfort with even calling myself a lettering artist. It still makes me kind of cringe. I don't know what it is. I currently, like I said, work in the city of Chicago. I've been lucky enough to work on brands of all sizes, big and large. And my work a lot of times looks something like this. From various projects, the one down the center there in the middle is a piece I did with, or a project I did with Nike to customize shoes leading to the Chicago Marathon. That was a fun one because I'm also a big runner, and it was like an intersection between my dream client, Nike, myself as a runner, and myself as the lettering artist, all kind of in one. But then also things like the very top right-hand corner there, where you're seeing the coffee made out of beans. So it kind of varies. It might also look something a little bit like this, where I make stickers or make apparel or lettering pieces that go in apparel. The one in the bottom right there is really fun. It's something I recently did. I'm not sure I'm technically supposed to share it. I did just sign the contract this morning and send it away, but it was a little piece I did for Moen, the faucet company, to make lettering look like water, which is a fun and unique challenge. But it also could look something closer to this, which you're seeing the first time we're seeing some food being used in lettering, some pens. Of course, I have one on, and you feel free to buy one from me. I need to make money here. And then even pieces that were in the Atlantic, like the King is King, before King was King piece. Sorry, stumbling a little bit. So as you can see, I do a fair amount of work as a designer and as an art director, but generally speaking, my work revolves around lettering. It revolves around typography. So I'll share a lot of different pieces. I've already shared a fair amount of them here, various styles, but we'll go a little bit deeper into it. Many people often ask me, how did I get into lettering? They think it was something that I was an innate talent that I was born with, that I came out of the womb writing like an OG. That's not the case. I actually have a really, really weird backstory, and I'm going to talk about it again, or a little bit, sorry. By again, I mean I talked about it in the first session. They told me I shouldn't share my story, and I was like, who the hell are you? This is my chance to shine. But people always think that I've always had good handwriting, or I've always been creative, and that's not necessarily the case. So how did I get here? Well, I kind of stumbled into everything that I'm doing right now, right? I've stumbled into design, sort of. I stumbled into lettering. I definitely stumbled into being on an Adobe Max stage. I don't know why the fuck they let me do this, but they did, and I am here, and I'm going to shine. It's a little bit of a long and boring story, but it all kind of started at a younger age for me. Not everyone knows this. It's definitely becoming more popular as I've done more interviews and been able to share my story on stage or wherever else. But growing up, I had no passion for art. I never took an art class. We all take one in elementary school, but that doesn't count. We're just mushing some paint around. But in high school or college, or leading into college, I never took an art class. My dad was an engineer, and I kind of had this focus. I wanted to be an engineer. I wanted to be like my dad. He's an awesome man. And so in high school, I was taking nothing but engineering and physics classes. Weirdly, I'm sort of a smart designer in terms of math. I can retain it when it's told to me a couple times. But so I went to school as an engineer, as a civil engineer, and about a year and a half into the program, I realized that it just didn't feel right. I couldn't envision myself being an engineer, sitting at a desk with my button up on and a tie and making sure people don't die. That's too much responsibility for me. Now I draw letters, and it's the total opposite of that, which is great. Like I said, I couldn't envision myself being an engineer anymore. I didn't see myself in that kind of career field. So I kind of stopped trying. I stopped giving it all my classes. I stopped going to classes. I've definitely failed one class twice because I just didn't even take the midterm. I was like, nah, I'm not going to pass this class anyway. So I stopped going. Then after a few classes, I and sort of my advisor thought that maybe engineering wasn't the path for me. At that point, I had a sub-1 GPA, which is surprisingly very hard to do. It's hard to have less than a 1-point grade average, but I definitely had one for quite a while. So I kind of had to have this awkward conversation with my parents. to tell them that I didn't want to be an engineer anymore. They pushed back on me. My parents are super supportive, but they pushed back on me. They were like, don't quit. Give it a second try. Give it a third. Let's make sure it's something that you don't want to do before you just abandon yourself, before you just abandon this career. So I kept doing it. I stayed around for another semester. I blew a couple $1,000 extra in the process before really realizing that it wasn't something I wanted to do. So in order to stay a full-time student, of course, I had to have 12 credit hours. So I kept taking classes and took some generic kind of classes. I was lucky enough to stumble into a drawing class at the very beginning, and it kind of clicked for me. I was not good at it. I was not a good drawer. I still to this day am not. But it was just something I was very intrigued by. So I decided that maybe I should try this thing called graphic design. Like, it's the way that artists make money, so let me at least try that. Luckily, that really clicked and that really stuck. So I had to have this second very awkward conversation with my parents to tell them that not only did I not want to be an engineer anymore and leave a career path that was very focused, that like had a goal, had a set of steps to go from here to there, and then had a really, really structured salary. But I wanted to give that all up and become an artist. To like not have any kind of security in their minds, to not have any sort of plan, to always kind of be wandering through things. They were a little apprehensive at first, but they understood that it was something I'd given the time to. I devoted the time to try to learn something new, to try to do something, figure out what it was that I was really passionate about. So they backed me. They were all behind me. They said, look, if you want to do it and you really think it's the right thing for you, you can do it. I think they were just making sure that it was something I was really passionate about. They knew that no matter what, it was something that I was fully capable of making something out of. And I guess I did, right? Like I'm standing on stage in front of you guys, and I don't know why the hell I am, but I am. I made something out of it. But more than that, I'm literally making something out of it. Like this, right? Like this is a piece that I recently worked on for Valentine's Day. No one gives me Valentine's because I'm single. Wink, wink. So this is a Valentine's Day I made for my social media following. I want you guys to all know that. Or making something that's more like this. And this is kind of where I am today as an artist and designer. And we'll talk a little bit about this. But I just wanted to let you guys know, I summed up like 10 years of struggle in a couple of slides, right? That was a really quick transition between those. It was not quite that easy. There was a lot of roadblocks and a lot of finding myself and a lot of crying at night, whatever it was, trying to figure out what it was. So not all those transitions between one phase to another phase of my life were quite like this one. Now that was a good transition, right? Like, it's the only transition you're going to see in this entire deck, I promise, because I think that they're god-awful to ever use them. But it also kind of started, though, this like where I'm at now, those photos, those large-scale pieces like the title slide you saw, all kind of started with a small project that was kind of birthed out of the agency that I worked at. A little bit ago. So at this agency, they had this thing that was called Curiosity Hour, which is 1 hour a week in which you could do anything. It was a billable hour or non-billable hour a week, something that you could put towards anything you wanted to do. You could be curious in any way you wanted to be curious. For some people, that 1 hour was like an hour to not do anything, right? It was an hour to watch a video on YouTube. It was an hour to just build to if you didn't make 40 for the week. You're like, oh, I don't know what I did for an hour on Monday, so it was Curiosity Hour. For some people, it was taking a walk. It was going to the museum. It was walking down Chicago's gorgeous lakefront, whatever it was. But for a coworker and I, Curiosity Hour, we thought it was a time to really be curious. We wanted to explore. We wanted to see what we can do outside of our normal design job, because it gets boring after a while. So what we ended up doing was we decided that we wanted to make something. We wanted to be forced to have an hour to create something every single week. So what we did is we had a little bowl. We wrote a bunch of themes on them. We all dropped them into that bowl. Once a week, we would determine early in the week like when we'd have the most flexibility in our schedule. We would all sit down, me and her, and it eventually grew and more people joined us. But we would sit down together and we would reach in and we would grab a theme out. We would read the theme and we would start a timer on our iPhones. And we had exactly 1 hour to concept, create, shoot, design, whatever it is that we wanted to do. It was great because at the beginning, I was still a lettering artist, right? I was still practicing lettering and learning lettering. So at the beginning, I was just drawing lettering pieces. I was just doing that. But I wanted to push a little further. So I wanted to start doing things I was a little less comfortable with. it eventually led to me practicing and learning a lot more about photography. We had a full studio in our office, so what I was doing was picking up our camera and asking people that worked closely with me or worked close by, can I practice shooting headshots for an hour? It'll be your curiosity hour, your hour in which you get to spend by not being at your computer, not doing work. And it's an hour that I get to try to be on the other side of the camera, right? To look through the lens, to figure out how to set the camera up or how to set lighting up, like in a photo like this, right? Where we're experimenting with different gels over top of the lights that I was working with. So we had a really dark studio. So the challenge is always, you'll see if you look on my website, there's a lot of portraits on there. A lot of them are really dark because it was like a really, really dark studio that we shot in. So they all kind of rotated around that. After a while, I started to try to get a slightly more conceptual, start to like have actual ideas for whatever it was that I was shooting. And eventually led to a little series like this. I called this series Black versus White. And so Nikki, who is my coworker, she sadly could not be here today. But it's her hand and my hand. And so we would spend these curiosity hours practicing together. I can't even remember what the first one was. I think the first one was the bottom left. And I think the theme might have been like collaboration or something. And so it was both of us holding hands or holding the same coffee cup, right, from two different sides. But we decided we liked this idea. So we kept pushing it. We're like, what else can we do with this? It just so happened that at the same time we were doing this, Apple released their new racially diverse emojis. So we actually based all of our hand movements off of the racially diverse emojis. So the idea of black versus white were two contradicting or pairing emojis that went together. So there's the praying hand / high fives that you'll see up there. There's peace and protest. The two in the top right, the one in the middle and the one on the right hand side, were actually when there was in the news at the time was a lot of, unfortunately, black men being shot by the police. And so I was really passionate about it, so I wanted to share my thoughts and my feelings in a really emotional way for me. So the one on the right was when something happened in Charlotte, which is where I'm originally from. A lot of my friends were out protesting, so this idea of peace and protest, we can do both together at the same time. And then the one in the middle was for hands up, don't shoot. And it was like when a very popular phrase was floating around the internet. So I was really trying to push it creatively, really trying to push it conceptually when it got to this point. But after a while, even doing this, another kind of idea formed. It started alongside it. I was sitting at a desk, and I worked at a PR agency, and PR agencies are predominantly women. It's like a huge skew towards women versus men who work there. And there were lots of excess flowers that were just floating around. They were sitting on people's desks, and they would die, and people would leave them and walk away, and it come back to like a fully dead, dried out bouquet. So I started asking a really simple question. Can I have your flowers? It was really creepy when you ask like a girl who works next to you who was given a bouquet of flowers by her fiance or a boyfriend if you can just have them before they fully die. And surprisingly, so many of them said yes. They started donating me their flowers, their bouquets. And I was just so enthralled by them. I kept them. I collected them around my desk. They just sat there. At any given moment, I'd have 5 to 10 bouquets around me. It's creepy. And it gained a lot of bugs around me. My pod mates were not happy at this point. I started looking at them and really appreciating them. I was trying to figure out a way in which I could let them live on. How can I make them live longer? They have such a short shelf life, right? They get cut, they get put in a vase, and within a week they're dead. We kind of forget about them. I think that's really sad. I know it's morbid, but it's sad. So I wanted to figure out a way I can like bring them to life. How can I keep looking at these flowers over and over again? And also the designer in me kept thinking like, what color are these things exactly? One day I pulled out a Pantone swatch book and I tried to match it to the flowers, like the nerd that I am, and it clicked. I had a little idea, and I created this little series. It's now called Pantone Flowers, but this is a real series. It's a real card that I cut out to look like the Pantone swatch, if you guys have seen it, and I place it over an actual over an actual flower. All these photos were taken with my iPhone, no fancy camera setup, nothing big whatsoever, but it's an actual card that's laying on an actual flower. Granted, I retouched the hell out of these in order to make that frame perfectly white and perfectly square. And also the designer in me wanted them to be perfectly straight every single time, like in the exact same place. And so here's a couple more of them. One thing I really loved about this series is it not only allowed me to do something creative and cool, but it forced me to learn what these flowers are. I had to actually Google red flower with seeds, and you just have to go through 100 different flowers until you find one that kind of matches it. And some of these might not be right. So if they are wrong, let me know. If you guys remember, in the very first one here, it actually just says Pantone Random Yellow. Like, I didn't know what those are. Marigolds? Okay, see, I didn't even know. Still to this day, I don't know. That's sad, right? But that's, like I said, that's when it all sort of clicked. As Oprah would say, that was my aha moment, right? That was my paradigm shift. That was that moment I think I was dreaming of having for so long in my career up until that point. It was the intersection of these things I love that I was becoming more passionate about photography and about these flowers and about design. I was starting to mix everything together. So I did what every aspiring designer or creative does when they have a cool idea and they're ready to be taken seriously. I went out and dropped money on a new camera because I was like, yo, if I'm gonna do this for real, I gotta go buy something real. People gotta take me seriously when I show up to a project, not just my iPhone. But buying this camera allowed me to explore more creatively outside of my office. Now I can actually take and schedule photo shoots, plan photo shoots in my own home or anywhere else. As a part of this, I started just shooting photos of things just to announce them, shooting my design pieces. So this is a shot I took of my camera to share that I got a camera. It's really weird. I like strung it with fishing wire in like a little box that I assembled just to announce to Instagram that I bought a new camera. It's weird, it's stupid, but it was this idea that I was really starting to fall in love with it, and I really want to experiment a little bit more. This, of course, kept my passion for portraits going, and this was the first time I got comfortable shooting portraits of people outside of my office, people I wasn't working with. I have to ask them if they'll be my model, which is a little different than having a coworker who knows you intimately, allow you to experiment and take a photo of them. Eventually, it kind of led to some more exploration, and now I started to bring this idea of flowers back. This was a dying bouquet. I'm pretty sure it was from my boss's desk, and I made the logo of the company I worked at then to celebrate my 1-year anniversary there. So I was really starting to just push it to play with cool ideas. That love for flowers and that love for portraits still merged into pieces together, where I started making flower crowns for my models. This was also the first time I actually worked with a real model. It was amazing. Real models are incredible. They like take 3 shots in a pose and they switch and do it again. They go from smiling to really serious really fast. It's amazing. Real people don't do that. The one on the left is it's a fake rose, fake black roses, and then the one on the right was it's partly fake, but real flowers in it. So I was playing a lot with with the flowers too. So at this time, this was all happening while I was working a full-time job, and I was still exploring, I was still learning so much more. The great thing about this is it led to my agency that I worked at trusting me a lot more with what I was doing. They trusted me to take on projects and do photo-based things from this thing that I was learning on the side in the studio. It also helped that the account that I worked on had no budget. We couldn't afford to hire photographers, so they just hired my ass to do it, which is great. They were already paying me to do it. It just doubled up what I was doing already. It eventually led to a project that was for a grocery chain called Aldi. They were launching their Instagram channel. This was, I think, in 2014 or 15. No, 2015. And they wanted to have posts already on their account before they made their account public. So what we did is we actually designed 9 separate images that would spell the word delicious. Each of the images would be made out of things that they sold at either a product that they sold or produce that they sold inside of their store. So the idea was to not make it overtly an ad. No, you don't want too forceful here. So you'll see like in the bottom left-hand corner and right-hand corners of those images respectively, you'll see the product slowly slide into the frame, which is really subtle. If you know all these packaging and you know their brands, you see it, you know it, you recognize it. But some like these, the blueberries and the pomegranate, these were a little bit different. They didn't actually have a brand for it, so we didn't have to put it into the image. They let us be a little more flexible there, not trying to just sell people on something. And something like this. And I love to talk about the C that's there. This actually came from working with a food stylist. I learned how to make granola sit on a bowl of yogurt. I'm going to tell you guys the secret. It's actually a bowl with a plate inside of it. And there's like a real thin painted layer of yogurt. There's like barely any yogurt, and everything sits right on and doesn't sink inside of it. So if you ever want to shoot a bowl of cereal or yogurt, it doesn't sink to the bottom. That's how you do it. Yeah, one little tip for you guys. Oh, damn, that was great. But doing these things, especially at work, was giving me the opportunity to not only explore and be creative, but to feel things. And that's what I was really kind of taken away by. In this, the U that's over there made out of the popcorn, like that's my hand in it. Right, and so it was this weird like Denzel Washington moment, right, where I get to be the star of it, I get to be the producer, I get to be the director, and damn it, I can own it too. Like I bought the studio out, right? Like that's what it felt like. I felt like it was all inclusive. And then there it was again. That was like my aha moment again. I don't know why I didn't realize it, but I could use those things and make letters out of them, right? Like I got this simple project to do just a single letter 9 times, but now I could do multiple letters. I could spell out things, and that's where it kind of clicked. It started off really simple, and a piece like this. This was another Curiosity Hour prompt. The prompt was energy. For the prompt, I decided to give up coffee, which I know is sacrilegious to all you guys, to all you designers. I'm back on the bandwagon, don't worry. But I gave it up for a couple of months in the favor of tea. I switched to non-caffeinated tea. This was green tea, it's caffeinated. But in that early phase, I had to wean myself off of it a little bit. But this is just to announce that I was just only using tea. So I bought a couple tea bags and I spread out and spelled a word on stage. This was really simple. It was only probably about 2-ish feet wide. But eventually they got a little more complex. So this is a piece that I did for hashtag National S'mores Day. I call those things holidays. They're faux holidays. I'm not sure who the hell determines like what the fuck they are and why they are on the date they are, but they are. Like for some, I think it's August 10th. It's National S'mores Day, in case you were wondering. I don't know what was about it, but I decided I like s'mores enough to go buy all this shit to make an image and put it on Instagram. But it was, once again, the opportunity to explore something new, which is fun. Unlike the previous one, this is the first one I actually made and shot with my own camera. This is when I bought that professional camera because that first one was just done at work really quickly with my iPhone overhead. But not only did they start to grow and get a little bit bigger, right, but they also got a little more complex. A little larger. Oof. They got more complex, then they got larger. Sorry. This is a little tease for a piece. We're going to talk about this one a lot more in here in just a second. But now you can see how much these pieces have grown in scale, right? Like this one's over 8 feet wide compared to the last one being about 5 feet wide. Like I said, we'll come back to this one in just a second. But I want to talk about how these things start to become what they are, how they became what you see on screen today. So I'll start with a piece that looks something like this. This is a recent one that I did. But they all start with a very simple idea, a very simple little sketch that they're based on. So I'm going to break it down a little bit. Start with something that looks just like this, right? This is actually what I scanned and sent to the client as 3 individual conceptual sketches to how this thing would come together. So this was created for a nature center that was up in Wisconsin, and they wanted to show off what they had to offer because this was the invite to their 50th year anniversary gala. So the tagline to their whole gala, their whole event, was the start of something wild. So in the lettering approach, I wanted to make it wild. I wanted to make it look wild. So I kind of sketched out some ideas that would look a little wild, and trying to think about what elements in it make it look that way, what makes it feel that way. After a bunch of hiking to retrieve plants and sticks and even frogs and turtles, I slowly started to build this piece, right? Start to lay out these elements on the ground. They all start really simple with a base layout of things, and then I build upon it. And then we get some beautiful little shots like this. I threw this one in because this was probably the first. No, maybe not the first. But this is one of the early projects in which I actually had to go cut living flowers and kill them for the sake of my art, which is really, the whole reason I started doing these things out of flowers is a way to preserve and prolong flowers. So this is the first time I was killing them purposefully to like make a piece out of it. So these lilies were super delicate. As soon as you take them out of the water, they curl up and they're no longer good for a photo. And we didn't know that going into it, so we set up the arrangement, and then like within 5 minutes, they're like not usable. So we had to like do it 2 or 3 times for the final shot, which is such a bummer. So pour one out for the little lily flowers that I've killed. But there were no fancy setup here. This is a really simple piece that I created, and it was all done with a single camera that was mounted overhead, that was resting on a folding table and a couple of high chairs. Like, for real. This is the behind-the-scenes shot of me actually making this image, right? Like, there was nothing that was there. Shot with just straight natural light, propped up on some stuff, because they did not have room. I had to shoot it on location, so I didn't have room to be in my studio in order to do it. I'm living, breathing proof that you don't have to have anything fancy in order to create something really, really beautiful. All you need is a little idea and a drive. Like, you have to be able to make it happen no matter what. So even in this photo, you can see where that harsh sunlight is like cutting through the window right there. We had to like go and survey the place the day before and see where the shadow, like where that sunlight landed. And so at the time we need to shoot the final image, it would be past the edge of the paper because there was very few areas inside their space that we could completely black out or make sure the sun wasn't shining through. But we wrapped the final lettering piece, but we wanted to see if there's a way that we can add more context to it, right? Like, how can we make it feel even wilder? We built it out of sticks and leaves and things like that, and it's cool and it's quirky, but we wanted to really push the idea of wild. So what we began to do was add more to the frame. We wanted to add more context to it, and this was the final image. So the final image is full of all kinds of little things. But what we learned in this little process is that not only did the ability to add these extra little things into our frame make it look wilder, it was an opportunity for us to showcase what that nature center was about. Every single plant that's on their property, or not every plant, but all the plants that are in this piece come from their property. And they were very adamant about that. They said we couldn't bring anything off-site because their members are so loyal that they'll know if you use a maple tree leaf that doesn't grow in Wisconsin, which I was like, okay, we won't. We'll make sure we use everything on your property. And even like the sturgeons, when they do like a sturgeon fest where they raise these prehistoric fish that are in here in the little bucket beneath. So it gave us the ability to start to add things that they had there, from their grounds outside on their trails to everything that was in their little community houses. So like they have these like dead skulls and they have like terrariums and all kinds of things. So we pulled these things into the shot. Another way we added some serious context to it, and a big part of this, was to show that it wasn't just for kids. You'll see the hands that are in there. There are kid hands and there are adult hands in it. The top left one, those are my hands. You know, It's like I always star my own pieces. I tell you, star, direct, everything. That's also a way I have to pay a model in order to do it. But in photography, in design, in anything that a client is going to try to pay you for, you got to remember that context is everything, right? Like, we add a little more context to it, we can really, really spice up whatever it is that we're creating. So adding and finding and adding context to the individual pieces are what I love about these kind of things. What I love about this intersection of photography and design. So these are the little prompts. I give these prompts as reminders to myself. You know, the name of the talk is a photo is worth more than 1,000 words. So the idea of these pieces is to add more meaning, add more words to each of them, right? There's only a single word that's there on the paper, and you can say that the photo adds 999 more, right? It makes 1,000. But how do we continue to add more to it? So how do I make it more than just a single word on a piece of paper? By adding context, by showing what wild really was, by showing what the River Edge Nature Center had to offer, is showing that it was for everyone. Because no matter what, context always matters. It adds so much more. It adds a deeper level of connection to whoever the viewer is. You got to think, if you were a member of that Nature Center and you got that in the mail and you knew those plants, you'd be so excited. They only have one or two turtles in their property. Those are the two turtles that they have in their little their inside space. So you probably like seen that turtle before. So that ability to add context really, really helps. So the second way I add to my pieces, to add more meaning, to add more context to it, is something really, really simple, but it's really, really easy to take advantage of, and that's color. So I'm going to show you a piece that looks something like this. This piece was a digital holiday card for an agency. What they want to do is they want to send out this via email to all of their clients to just wish them a happy, happy holidays. So just like everything else I do, it all started with a very, very simple sketch, right? This is the actual sketch I sent to the client, to the agency, so they can approve and get a ground for what we were trying to make here. The idea was simple. Like I said, it would just say happy holidays, and that we would use a Christmas tree / garland in order to make it. So I wanted to be warm. I wanted to feel cozy. I wanted to feel welcoming. I wanted to feel like the holidays. But the first thing I did is I started with a constant. The constant was the tree. I knew it was green. So what is the next thing I think is what pairs well with green, right? Of course, that's red. If we look at our complementary color wheels, red is across from green. I wanted to make sure that those colors were complementary. Luckily for me, red and green scream it's the fucking holidays. So it really, really helps in the overall piece that I'm creating. So this is a little in-process shot, right? You can actually see where I'm at in the frame. The camera is actually mounted on the ceiling there, and I shoot all these pieces remotely down. So I wanted to still have a sense of warmth, so I made sure I chose a color of red that paired well with the green that was already there. I didn't want it to be too bright. I didn't want it to be too deep, right? They're an agency. They're not there at night in front of the fireplace. They are there during the day and doing things for their clients. So here's the final piece, and I'm not sure. Okay, it does play. On my presentation, it doesn't actually show me that it's moving around. So this was the final holiday card image. This is what their clients opened up in their email inbox. It was a warm, happy holidays from the agency. And I wanted this to feel like Christmas. I think it does, right? Like, even if you couldn't read English, right? Like, if English wasn't your first language and you didn't know what it said, you would still think that it's something holiday related, right? And I think that is the beauty. That was the thing I was really going for here. Yeah, I use color, and I use that to my advantage, but I also use the employees of the agency in the final shot. So that's them right there. There's 3 of them. They're a small agency, and a lot of their clients know their names. They know what they look like, so I wanted to add them to the frame. I wanted them to feel, their clients to feel like they were the ones wishing them a happy holidays, not me. And of course, that staged them all into the final frame. So it looks like she's like cutting and like placing a piece in there. She didn't do shit. I did it all. This is all my hard work. They just like came in for the glory moment and got into the final image, which is kind of fun. But like I said, I wanted to make sure that everyone who saw this digital invite like knew it, recognized it, and it felt personal to them. So how did I make it worth more than just a holiday greeting, just the words happy and holidays? By making sure that the colors match the message, that it continued to add to it, right? Like that it deepened the overall feeling when the viewer picked it up. Because even if the idea is incredibly simple and the color palette's even simpler, 2 colors, we always can remember that colors create feeling. They give us a feeling. We see things and we react certain ways. We also have to remember that color doesn't necessarily translate over different backgrounds. So people from different countries might see a red and green image and think something a little bit different. But we can, for the most part, we and the people you work with can use that color to our advantage. So the third way I make these photos come to life even more is something I'm really keen on. I do it a lot, and it's by using those imperfections to my advantage. So this is a piece I recently worked on. This is a beer bottle label. It was done for a brewing company in Chicago. It was a very, very special beer. It would only be made once. The unique combination of elements for the recipe would never happen again because they came from different places in order to make it. So it was a special moment for me, so I wanted to make it special. So just like everything else, again, it starts with a sketch. I know, boring. This is the sketch I sent to the client to just try to get a proof of concept. I wanted to see what we can make. Excuse me. I knew I wanted it to be a lettering piece because I'm a lettering artist, and I knew I wanted to feature mangoes because the name of the beer is, it's pretty sure it's pronounced Mangofera Flux. I'm not 100% sure. Every time I got on a call, I would just say Mangofera, and they just knew what I was talking about. But I knew that I wanted to add mangoes to it because it was a mango-flavored beer. But the agency I was working with brought up the idea to use liquid. And this is one of those payoff moments when in one of the early Curiosity Hour pieces, I created something that was using liquid as a type. It was actually for National Waffle Day. I don't know what day that is. I don't know who decided upon it. I really am a big fan of waffles, so I use it as an excuse to go buy a waffle maker for the first time. And I made a piece that says waffles are pancakes with abs. It was like the piece I did. And so I did it out of syrup above a plate that was stationed there. So it was that idea that something I explored creatively as a random side project turned into something real, turned into a label eventually. But when they mentioned the idea, of course, I was all for it. I was like, hell yeah, I'll try it. Let's see what we can do. So it all started simple with a really simple test. This is a test that I did with simple syrup because I knew this. I like syrup makes sense. I couldn't use pancake or waffle syrup because I knew it was colored too differently. So I made some simple syrup and I added some yellow and red dye in order to make it orange. So these are my first couple tries. I think this was the first try. And as you see, it's a little weird and it starts to bleed out, and the idea of a flux, it really starts to flux. But one thing I noticed in the early makings of this, I noticed those little drips that were happening. They were happening naturally, very organically. Every time I would try to use the applicator bottle, when I would pick it up or turn it back over, a little bit would flick out of the end of it. And I really enjoyed it. I was like, oh, this is a really cool feature of it. And maybe it's not such a bad thing. So I went back to the drawing board, literally. This is, like I said, it was my coffee table that I was doing this on. That coffee table to this day is ruined. It's still in my office, and you can still see the initial exploration of this piece before I went into the final. But I landed on the idea of doing corn syrup instead. Corn syrup was a little thicker. It held together a little bit more. It didn't spread away. And so this is a work in progress shot of me actually making it with the same kind of applicator bottle, but with a different liquid inside, dyed the same way. But like I said, the second time I went about this, it went far more smoothly. It started to work out, and the piece, though, as it was coming together, really worked. But what I noticed is those little drips that were happening weren't happening anymore. And the thing I liked about it, the charm that I liked in that first little piece, wasn't happening. So I actually brought them back into this new piece. And as you see, if you look closely, the letters themselves are made out of corn syrup. They are nice and compact and tight and don't bleed away. The little droplets are a different color. It's because those little droplets are the simple syrup again. I wanted to bring back the same elements that I really found charming in the original piece and put it into the secondary piece. But those little droplets help the viewer, help you guys know that it's real. It's a real juice on a real surface. And that's what I think is super important, right? It puts the viewer, it puts every one of you in my shoes, and it makes you think, if I was creating something that looked like this, I'd probably fuck up too, right? I would probably have a couple extra droplets that landed on the paper. And I think that little bit of context with your imperfection really, really helps. And here's the final product. So of course I brought those mangoes back. Funny story, this is the first time in my life I think I'd ever actually cut a mango. I had to Google how the hell do you cut a mango, because it's not intuitive. Of course you go down the middle and you just reach a stump a half inch into it. Oh, this is weird. That's clearly not how it is. So it took a lot of mangoes in order to figure out how to slice them that gorgeously. And some retouching. Don't worry, I retouch everything. But I use those mangoes that are in the frame. I use them as context. It helps you to know that it's mango juice, even though it's not, right? It's clearly corn syrup, and it's clearly been placed onto a surface. But it still kind of resonates as the idea of it being mango juice. But those little imperfections help to reinforce the message and the material. So once again, how do I make it worth more than just the words that are on that table, than just the words that are on that label? By showing that it was something real in a very real way, like making a real piece and photographing it. By showing that something can be professional and not necessarily be mechanical, right? Those two don't have to always exist together. Because we can always remember that perfection isn't necessary. We don't have to always try to make everything perfect. Some things in our life, if you're an engineer for NASA and you're trying to send a man to the moon, you might want to make sure that shit's perfect. Otherwise, it blows up in space. For the rest of us who are just making videos and content and images, it might not have to be perfect. Not everything has to be the perfect shot, right? We can use those imperfections sometime to our advantage. So don't fear them. Embrace them. Bring them into your piece whenever it's necessary. Sometimes you have to get rid of them. It's totally understandable. The client might not like it, but there's certain things that we can always add to everything. A little bit of imperfection to everything to make it a little bit better. Okay, so there's a fourth step, right, that I use, a fourth reminder, as I say, in order to add a little bit more meaning. And it's the piece I'm going to show you. It was the one I teased at the very beginning. So this is one of my favorite pieces I've created in my entire career. It was that real, everything intersected here. It was the photography, it was the flowers, it was the lettering, it was me. I love myself, so me being in it too. All of it comes all together in one piece together. So this was for print magazine, and for even better, this is for amazing recognition. Every year up until last year was the final year. I like to say that I was a part of the group that killed it. They no longer do it. But every year they did what's called their new visual artists, which is an annual roundup of the top creatives under 30. So I was so lucky to be recognized as one of them, the 15 artists under 30. I was humbled and I was stunned, of course, like all those like magic words you put in your captions when you post about it. And I to this day still am. Like it is absolutely surreal. But as a part of the honor, they asked me to create and design a cover, a potential cover. So everyone does it, all 15 of us do it. One would be chosen for the actual cover of the magazine. The next would be the next 14 pages of that magazine. Unfortunately, I did not win the top spot. Womp womp. But I was placed in one of the 14 pages. And that was like halfway through, so I'm not sure if that meant mine was only like halfway as good, or it was like just alphabetical order, and that's where I landed. But we're gonna assume alphabetical order. It made it in the magazine nonetheless, and here it actually is there. It's a 1/12 scale image of the proportions of a normal cover. So I think a normal magazine is like 8 by 12-ish or 8 by 11-ish. It is the same thing. It's 8 feet by 11 feet, which is kind of cool. Whoa. Got music. All right. No, I guess I gotta bring up the level. Jesus fucking Christ. It's a lot. Well, the reason why I share this piece is, wow, that is really distracting. Sorry, guys. The reason why I share this piece is because it's the final way I add more impact to the pieces I do. And that's with scale, using scale to my advantage. Although that this is the one, I think it's the largest piece that I've done. Although the scale is much bigger than everything else, just like everything, it all starts with a super simple sketch, right? This is a 2-inch sketch that I actually sketched in a notebook, took a photo of it on my iPhone, reversed the colors, and literally sent it like this is to the editor. I just wanted to get a proof of concept, like, what if I do something crazy and put myself in it? And they love the idea. So next, I did a little Photoshop mock-up. As you can see, I used a real photo of myself laying in the corner, right? It's actually really hard, weirdly, to find someone like laying down, face up, in like stock photos. But I found this guy, even though he looks nothing like me, and I put him in context, put him in frame. But the reason why I did this is because I needed a chance to preview what the scale was. And I needed to figure out approximately how many flowers it was going to take to make it. So when you're a starving artist like I am, you're poor as shit, you got to figure out how you spend as little money as possible on the most expensive material to create lettering out of, which is flowers. So I had to map this out just to get a gauge of how many flowers I needed. This is super simple to put together. If you look really closely, all the flowers are there photoshopped or replicated over and over again. They're actually from that original logo, that square logo. I just cut a section out of it and just kept replicating it over and over to just figure out context, figure out a scale for it. So, like I said, really shoestring budget. I usually go to flower shops and buy flowers that are on the dying side or broken, that they're not going to sell, that they're going to throw away anyway. I purchase those and I use those. So I'm still bringing back the same idea of how do I keep these flowers alive? How do I keep adding to their life? But like I said, it was nothing fancy, no fancy setup whatsoever. It was just a really simple idea that was done in a very large way. And so here's the full final image. I know you saw it on the cover, but here it is by itself. So for this particular one, I use the scale, this size, me scaling it up there, to my advantage. I put myself in it because I knew that I was being recognized for the award. I know as self-serving and as snobby as that sounds, I want people to know that I am a face, I am a human behind the things that I create. I am not anonymous, right? I want to put myself into it. So I made sure I scaled this up to a point in which I could be in it physically. With scale, I use myself as scale. I am a particular reference. You know, I'm probably like an average size person, average size man, so 5'10". So you can look at it and gauge like, oh, this is probably at least 5 feet wide. You can also kind of sense scale by looking at the flowers. You can look at the proportion of what an actual rose is, and it helps you to kind of multiply it out a little bit more. And also even leaving the wood on the sides, right? Like seeing those individual slats there help you realize the overall scale of it. It gives you as the viewer the ability to sense what that scale is. The principle of this are the same as any of the others. So I still, not only did I use scale and I scaled it up in a dramatic way, but I added context to it by putting myself in the frame, right? And by using the flowers and the materials that I did. I used colors that complemented each other, that complement the greenery that was there, that worked and harmonized with even my outfit, which was like, I went through multiple outfits to decide on that piece that day because I'm a diva. And I wanted to make sure like everything was like matchy. So my shirt, if you look really closely, is actually floral print, and so are my shoes. They're like floral stitch. So like I went all in on the flowers on this particular one. Also use imperfections to my advantage. So I do a lot of these on sheets of paper. So I a lot of times leave a little bit of that wavy texture into the paper. I left the sides exposed, and you can see the paper actually curves up a little bit, right? If you ever rolled out a sheet of paper, that's what it does. It curls up a little bit. I didn't want that to feel artificial. The only way to make a piece of paper stay flat the whole way is to tape it all the way down on the sides. So I wanted you to make sure that you knew it was a piece of paper. It wasn't just a mock-up of a blue piece of background that was there. And then lastly, I showed the scale by leaving recognizable objects, like I said, to help increase the impact. Like I said, myself, the paper itself, the flowers, the slats in it. And here's a couple of just close-ups of it. I'm like a sucker for like a nice, low, shallow depth of field image. They look a little blurry on here, but they're fine. Just so you can see actually how it came together. So with any of these pieces, I don't do any kind of, I don't sketch or lay things out on the paper itself. All of mine are done organically, every single one of them. I just start by slowly arranging sticks around to spell out things. For the print logo, I need to make sure it's by proportion. So I actually did like measure. I'd say this letter needs to be 2 inches wide, 1 inch gap, 4 inch letter, whatever it was. But I just start to arrange little stems to create the outsides of things and then fill it in and remove the sticks from around it. So if you look, and you can see in the bottom of the R, right, you'll see those two little stems that are actually coming down from it. Those are the guidelines to help make sure that R was in place properly. Here's one more close-up of it, just so you can see. And you can even see the imperfections in the paint, the little striations. Like I actually use acrylic paint on paper. I didn't want to make them perfect. I could have photoshopped them, made them perfectly round and perfectly straight and perfectly white, but I didn't want that. I wanted there to be some character in it, a little bit of me, a little bit of my handwriting that was a part of it. So once again, how did I make it worth more than just the words on the front of a magazine? It's by increasing the scale in a really big way. By mounting the camera to my ceiling, like having to use a 20-foot ladder to put it up there and run a cord over it. And then by showing that I was the person that made it. And remember that scale defines our impact, right? Like we do something big, it has a big impact. We do something small, it can still have a big impact, but it's a little bit harder. You got to make it probably a little more meaningful and be more cognizant of it. But if we do something really, really big and really, really grandiose, it feels that way to the viewer itself. And that's how I felt about that particular piece. So that's how I do it. Those are the 4 really, really simple tips. They're not complex at all. Those are the spices I use in my piece. I didn't give you the recipe. I gave you just a couple of tips, a couple little tidbits, and hopefully you can take those things and apply it to your recipes to spicing up your pieces a little bit more. The setups are always simple, but they always get the message across, I think, in a really, really fantastic way, right? Like the top left up there was just, I got off the bus a little early one day, 1 stop early, and I just took a walk because it stopped raining on the middle of my bus ride. And I found a bouquet of flowers laying on the curb, literally laying on the curb. I picked them up and took them back to my office, and I shot that image to stop and smell the roses. Just really simple setups. It's a really simple little photo. I mounted the camera overhead, and it was probably 2 feet wide, not even that. To the bottom, one beneath that, for Black History Month. It actually says, I know Kanye's apropos right now. Like I'm off the Kanye bandwagon for a little bit. I'm gonna get back on soon, I think. But one of his songs, he says, I make Black history every day. I don't need a month. And I posted it for Black History Month. And the entire in the frame, it's a large-scale painting, and I'm actually in it. I want to show you that I'm the one personally making Black history. I don't need a month necessarily in order to make history. To the print magazine cover in the middle, I just showed you. To the love image for Valentine's Day, to the one above, right? So these setups are always simple, but I think they get the message across in big, impactful ways. So they do it by remembering that context matters, that we can put things into it that helps instill a certain opinion or viewpoint to whoever the viewer is. By adding color to create a mood or to affect a mood. By remembering that perfection is never necessary. You don't have to do it. You can have some imperfections in there. It adds character. It makes it feel professional, but not necessarily mechanical. And then remembering, to me, it's the biggest, is that the scale defines the impact. In all of my images, I use something for scale. Always. If it's a mango in there, if it's a hand, if it's a full body, or even in the case of the wild one, it has just turtles and frogs in it. It's something that the viewer knows what the average size of it is, and they can use that to get a sense of scale for the entire piece. So like I said, remember that I don't have the recipe. I don't even know what it is. But I try to use these 4 little spices every single time to make my pieces even better. I would suggest that you try them for yourself. So moments like this, standing on the stage in front of you guys in this really creepy auditorium where people are talking around it, are just a living proof of like how much I've grown, how much I've seen myself grow from a kid who didn't know really anything about art to be a full-fledged artist, to do it full-time for myself, to be in front of people, sharing my story. Sorry if anybody's disappointed by it, but fuck it, I had to tell it. It all started with a blank canvas, a blank piece of nothing, right? And after a lot of time and work and effort, I've watched it develop, and I hope that everybody's followed me along. You've watched it develop too. Over a lot of time, it's been experimentation and growth and failing, and it's just kind of poetic that the thing that I use in a lot of my pieces start the exact same way. A really simple idea, a seed, something super small, and eventually blooms in something that's totally gorgeous. So. Thank you, guys. Thank you for attending. So, this is the really awkward moment, because I've planned this to not be long at all, whether we still have like 15 minutes, and we can totally do Q&A. But what's going to happen is half of you guys are going to get up and leave, and it's going to feel real lonely. But go ahead if you need to. If you want to go get a head start on the food or get a drink, I am totally behind it. We're going to open it up for Q&A. It's a little hard to see you guys because it's dark and it's bright, but I'll tell me the question, I'll repeat it, and then we'll continue moving on. Is that cool? That helps. Actually, that helps a little bit. That brightens you up a little. Go ahead. Yeah, so yes, how did I like the big piece, the magazine cover? That's actually from, in my studio, is a wall of windows, and it's all lit from that left-hand side. Funny story, I don't really talk about it because it was a very emotional moment for me. That cover, the procrastinator that I am, that most of us are, it had to be to the printer at like 11 a.m. on Friday. Like the genius I am, I decided to do the shoot on Thursday. So I do the shoot. I use natural light for everything. I get there in the morning, I start arranging flowers, and it's starting to turn out pretty good. And then, like the painted part that's there, I was just so turned off by what I had done, and I could not figure it out. I ended up panicking because it became 5 p.m., the sun was setting, and I was like, oh, this is not going to happen before the sun goes completely down. So I started to pull out the studio lights that I have to artificially light. I was like, whatever, it's a backup plan. But I didn't have enough blackout to black out all the windows that were there. And of course, Chicago has like that yellow tint of street lights. And I was like, I couldn't get the two to mesh or to balance. And I literally had a breakdown. I like spent an hour crying, like sitting there. Because like, it's this idea, I'm gonna be recognized as being a top 15 creative under 30, and I can't even get my shit together and like produce a magazine cover. So I like literally scrapped it all. Like I started over. I left I had part of the flowers part already there. The word print. And so the rest of it, I took a new piece of blue paper, rolled it up to it, taped it down over top of it. I photoshopped out that edge. But I put a new piece of paper down, and I started anew. Worked all night, woke up at 5, or I didn't wake up. I got dressed at 5 a.m., and the sun came up at 5:30. I shot the image, edited it. It was off to print by 10:30. Like, it was just like, I had to do it, and otherwise I was going to freak the fuck out. But yeah, I'm a big natural light user, so I always try to use it. Sometimes I can't, or I'm in the studio and working with an agency and I can't, but for the most part, I try to. Any other? Let's go over here, then we'll come back here. Yeah. Yeah, the question is there anything I use to keep the materials down on the paper? He said, especially the graham crackers. Jump back up. No, there's nothing I use. I don't glue them down. I don't situate them there. I let the material speak to me. Like the material itself does what it does. Luckily, crushed graham crackers, I can push in, and they kind of form up. Like they form a little mountain, right? So the whole thing looks like a mountain range, essentially, if you're looking at it from the side. But some materials don't do that, like blueberries in the little E that was there. They don't stack up. They just roll across. So like each material kind of dictates what's possible with it, but I don't glue it down. I'm like a little bit of a purist in the sense that I want the material to just be the material, like no fake ways about it. Like it has to be real, but yeah. except for the yogurt. But no, it's real yogurt. It's just not deep. It's just lightly painted. The only time the liquids are the only thing that are fake, like that are totally different. Like the one of the shower, it said showers that I was saying from mowing. It's supposed to like water. That's clear glue, and it's like that's the only thing that will like looks like water and doesn't spread like water. But the rest of it, it's like whatever it is. The material is for real. So the question is, where did I get the big pieces of paper, and how do I keep the frogs still? Big piece of paper came from a photo shop that was near my house called Dot Photography, and I just buy it. It's like a 96-inch or whatever, 106-inch piece of paper. How do I keep the frogs? So, funny story there. I am weird. I don't touch frogs. Like, I think they give you warts, and I don't believe in like ever handling one. Luckily, kids love frogs. So the executive director, her son and daughter were there. They went out, collected the frogs like from the ponds. And so what we actually did is we comped the fish and the frogs are comped in. I just had to leave a space for them because we had to put them on a surface by themselves. And like what she would do is open her hand and let them go, and it would hop and it would sit there for 1 second, and I was just like shooting like rapid fire until I can like get a photo of it sitting still. So yeah, some things are comped. It's okay. Let's go here. Yeah. It depends. Yeah, I try not to comp a ton of stuff, but some things have to be comped. Like the sturgeons that were in that little fish bin, they actually cannot be in water, but like a little tub like that. They suck in so much air, they can only be in it for like a matter of minutes. So in order to make it happen, we actually had to use one sturgeon, and like it's actually one sturgeon that swims around. I just captured it and comped them in because we wanted to add multiples, but we couldn't do it because it would literally kill these three sturgeons that are there. So I try not to comp things, but some things have to be. Like it's impossible not to. You just like take that with a grain of salt and everything that you do. It's still real. It's still done in a real way. It's just shot differently and put into the final product. And so a lot of times you'll see it because I do these by myself. If my arms are in it sometimes, if you just see one arm in it, it's because I was like doing this number. But sometimes I would like have to shoot a piece and then shoot my arms separately and then comp the two together because there's like no other choice if I wanted two in there. Let's go here. I'll look over there in a second. You saying most lettering artists do have a recognizable style?
I don't know if it's most, but like a lot of them do. Like,
Okay.
Like a certain font that they always
Yeah. So she's asking, she said certain lettering artists typically have some sort of style. And how important do I think that is? And how do you find it? Yeah, I think it's somewhat important. It doesn't have to be the end-all, be-all. It can be. You see plenty of lettering artists who like find their style. They lean the hell into it. They only have clients who hire them to do exactly what they do. Some of them treat it like what I think a graphic designer should do, which is to always try to pull the client's identity or whatever their vision is into it, like their ability to add different styles into a piece that works for the client. I think that my work is a balance of both. I do a lot of design stuff and lettering stuff, like digital lettering, and I pull in whatever inspiration or whatever like very specific references I have. But there's plenty of stuff that has my unique style to it. And like when I do something out of flowers, it's really difficult to make it look like your corporate logo. And like I'm sorry that it's like that's a hard thing to do. It's going to have a little bit of my character, and even the material helps dictate what the letters start to look like sometimes. So I think that it is somewhat important to have a little bit of style, but you can't be like just completely, unless you get to big level, right, where like you just have clients who just come to you to do that one thing. For the most part, we probably have to be a little more flexible in the things that we create. Okay, I wasn't sure if I saw one over there, but let's go. At what point in my career did I decide I needed to go freelance? I've been freelancing for a little over 2 years now. The last agency I worked at, it was as an art director. What I learned was I was starting to spend more time in meetings than I was doing creating. And that was okay, but like that wasn't the best environment for me. So I was trying to figure out ways in order to make myself design more and create more. So I started pushing the conceptual stuff there and like wanting to make more stuff. It's actually where some of the photography pieces in that agency start to come. Like I wanted to shoot it myself, and of course the budget was small. But I really decided when I wasn't doing really any lettering work outside of the stuff I was doing at home. I was trying to figure out how can I get more of this in my daytime job. I knew lettering was the thing I was most passionate about. It's what I felt like I resonated with. And I knew there was no way to put more of that or a significant amount of that into it. So I started looking for jobs and trying to figure out if there was a place that would just let me draw letters and pay me like a decent salary. It didn't exist. So I made the tough decision that I wanted to leave that agency and try to pick clients that would let me do that on a day in, day out basis. So I don't always do it. It's not like 99% of what I do, but it's like a heavy portion of what I am now, what I do now is lettering. So it was just for me, it was like a means to an end. Like I had to, in order to get there, I knew I had to make that leap for at least the time being. Cool. Yep. So the question is, when I do these large-scale things, do I use any kind of projections or projection mapping or whatever, or do I just go for it? I just go for it. I set up boundaries to everything, so I know exactly where like the left, right, top, bottom of the frame are. I set a mark for the middle. I've usually already done a sketch, so I know that the A needs to land in the middle. And then, so like I said, I actually start building with the elements, lay out a base guide to it, and then I begin to build on top of it over and over again. So if you see in one of those pieces at the very beginning of it, like if you ever saw me in the studio, it looks really bad. Like it's just like a line of leaves going to spell out a word. And then I slowly build more and more and more and more until it grows into whatever the piece is. So I try not to sketch too much on the paper. This is one more thing I got to Photoshop out, but just how I work. Yeah. Yeah, barely, but. The question is, are there any materials that I haven't used that I'm looking to use in the future? I don't know. The liquid thing was like one that was on the bucket list, like pushing that a little bit more, and getting able to do 2 projects like that within the last 3 months was super fun, and like it happened at the right time. Otherwise, I don't think there's anything like I'm really drawn to. The flowers are the main thing for me, so doing more things out of flowers make me happy, but I don't know if there's any other material that I'm like dying to use quite yet. I think it all just like when it happens, it happens. But otherwise, you know, yeah. The question is, how do I feel like after I'm done with the artwork? Do I feel bad or like am I like excited or whatever to get rid of it? I am so excited always to get rid of it. If you follow me on Instagram, one of my favorite things to do is the wipe. And I do the wipe like immediately. I should be better at like making sure that these photos are saved properly onto the hard drive, and then making sure that the camera doesn't like crash or whatever. But I'm not. I was like, as soon as I'm done, I'm like, is that image good? Cool, let's go. And we like wipe it immediately. I find so much joy in doing that. And even in this Max image, my friend is a photographer. She actually shot it because I wanted both my hands in it. After I'd already wiped it, I was like, shit, I didn't get any like behind the scenes like side angles of it. Literally all I have is like a bunch of top shots of it. Like, yeah. Yeah. So the question is, have I made something and seen it, and then think, can I do it again and make it better, right? I think as an artist, I can't speak for all of you guys, but I think a lot of us feel this way. After I've made something, I think it's shit. Like as soon as I'm done with it, I'm like, God, that thing was horrible. And I'm always thinking of like, maybe I should have done this, maybe I should have done that. I never, generally speaking, never rework it, but I'm always looking for a new opportunity to try it again and see if I can make it better. I think there's value in reworking certain things, but like in these large-scale flower pieces, like I need to start over, start fresh, start anew with a whole new piece, new concept, and let's see if I can like take it and take this approach, make it cooler, make it better. Any other questions, or we want to just wrap it? I don't know. You guys want to go to lunch? Let's go, or dinner? Yes. You guys didn't even have lunch today. You ran out, didn't they? All right. Thanks, guys.